Welcome to Pario magazine, where I chat with individuals who have a desire to create. Today, I'm joined by a singer from Canberra who is about to release her 8th studio album. Welcome to Pario magazine, Lisa Richards.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So we're here today to chat about your passion for music and your upcoming new album, Waiting to Fly. Before we dive into all of that, do you want to quickly give our audience a little introduction as to who you are outside the music studio?
Outside the music studio. Okay, I'm a human, clearly. Yeah, I mean, you mean in terms of what I like to do, or I
Yeah,
guess for
just
me,
like,
okay, so for me, music has became an integral part of my life. Not at a young age, but uh, the desire to make music has pretty much informed many of the decisions that I've made as an adult. So when you ask me who am I outside of music, I I think it's really hard for me to separate the two because music has been something that has really shepherded me into the world of living.
yep, great. And when did you sort of first discover that passion for music?
Well, the first time I remember wanting to sing was when I was a teenager. I was probably about 13 or 14, and I was drunk and standing on a coffee table and listening to the Rocky Horror Picture Show soundtrack on a record player and singing along loudly and drunkenly. And I just had this thought, maybe you could sing. And then I had this other thought straight away that said, don't be stupid. That's for other people. You can't sing. And so, it's taken a long time for me to learn to trust that voice that said, the one that says, maybe you could do this. Uh, so I think, I started singing when I was around 20. I started playing guitar at 30. I made my first album at 30, and that was in New York City. So the reason, really, once I discovered music, well, if you want to know the whole truth, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But what
Mhm.
happened was, I didn't have any hopes or dreams or goals or ambitions as a child. I just wanted to obliterate myself. So I did not think the world was a very good place. I didn't want to live in it. Um, I and then I had that little voice that said maybe you could sing. And the thing about that little voice is it kept getting stronger. So I kept trying to ignore it. It kept getting stronger. Like I wasn't learning an instrument. Uh, we actually were discouraged from playing instruments in the household uh, because my mother had been a concert pianist. She had a car accident, uh, became was brain damaged, became confined to a wheelchair, couldn't play the piano anymore. So my father sold the piano, and nobody was encouraged to play an instrument after that because it would upset her
Mhm.
because she couldn't play the piano anymore. So it wasn't until I left home that I started to dabble in music, and it was very tentative. But I became somehow I again in this voice. I don't know what the voice is, but it was telling me you're never going to be able to make music unless you quit doing drugs. So then I I went to rehab at 26 and got clean and sober, and in rehab they told me, you know, you can have a life beyond your wildest dreams, and nobody had ever said that to me, and I didn't have any dreams anyway. So so it's been a slow process of discovery and moving into adulthood and trusting myself enough to let myself do music.
On reflection, do you now sort of think of maybe that voice was kind of like a guardian angel giving you the light and path out?
Yes, I mean I definitely do. And the thing about that little voice is it has always been stronger than the doubt. So that is the same voice that told me I needed to move to New York City. Who moves to New York City? You know, I didn't know anyone. I didn't, you know, I moved to New York City because that little voice said, you need to be in New York City. You'll learn a lot here. Wasn't like you'll get rich and famous. It was like, you will learn a lot here.
Okay.
And I did. And then, you know, so yeah, I think that that voice, I have learned to, I don't always listen to it, but I have learned to pay attention to the internal state of my being.
And sort of you mentioned sort of being kind of a late bloomer, I guess, not releasing your first album until 30, but you're now about to release your 8th album. Do you think it was because it was such a strong pull towards music that you're now quite prolific?
Yes, I think the thing is that desire has never gone away. In fact, I would say it's stronger now because now it has a safe place inside me, and so this last album I made, I learned to record in this space here. So I never recorded anything. I didn't know how to use any software. I created the whole album here. So I never produced anything because I had told myself, oh, you can't do that. You don't know anything. Who do you think you are? You can't produce. You know, you can't record at home. So, I mean, and you know, I really thought that was a fact. Like, I
Mhm.
did not, it wasn't until I made this album that I'm like, oh my God, I can do this. Like, who knew? I had no clue. So, so yeah, so it feels like it's just kind of getting bigger. The 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 ability to create, yeah, is flourishing.
Was building that home studio something that sort of came about because of the pandemic and like it was the only option?
Yes and no. Yes and no. So what happened was I moved back to Australia um, after living in the US for 22 years. And when I came back, I had aspirationally thought, oh, I should get a microphone and a little, you know, system so I can record demos at home. You know, I can at least record rough ideas. So I got a vocal microphone and I got an Apogee Duet, which is a little, you know, a little box that you plug into. And, but I didn't use it. So when the pandemic came around, I, um, I found this woman online who's a producer, and she was teaching people how to use Logic Pro, the software. And so I wrote to her and I was like, I don't know. I have this microphone, I have a computer, I have the little boxy thing. Do you think I'm capable of doing this? And she was like, oh my God, absolutely, yes. And I was like, well, she thinks I can. So, Yeah, so with the pandemic, definitely, because I had the last album I made it in New York City with, uh, I got a grant, and I went over there and I worked with a producer and a bunch of great musicians, and then I came back and I was getting ready to release it and tour it, and then the pandemic happened. So all of that stopped, and I didn't, it was kind of like, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to complain about it or dig in and upskill? So
Yeah, I guess upskilling was the way to go rather than sitting around twiddling your thumbs.
apparently, yeah. So I mean,
And
I
now that you
probably
have,
did some twiddling as well, but
yep, now that you have the home studio, do you find that that's conducive to creating more things? Like as soon as inspiration strikes, you can run out to the studio and record something?
theoretically, yes. But I don't really work on inspiration. I just work on a structure. So I created a structure to write the songs, and then I said I would create an EP. So I'd record. So I had a bunch of songs already written. So then I recorded 6 songs, and then the pandemic kept going. So then I recorded another 5 songs for an
Mhm.
album. But I had already had all those songs written. Uh, but I think the thing I'm also discovering is that for me there are cycles. So, and I right now I haven't been writing because I was recording, and now I'm going into an outward cycle of sharing the work by touring. So, but I'm about to start writing songs again, like on a regular as a regular practice, and then yeah, I mean the question is always time, really.
Yep. And yeah, you've
But
you've
I
just
will be in here, and I hope to learn more and grow as in the studio. But yeah, now the cycle has moved into outwardly doing stuff.
okay. And you've just released the first single from the new album. The single's called
Mhm.
Pebble in a Slingshot. How exciting was that moment to have that song now out in the wild?
Well, it's pretty exciting. I mean, it's pretty exciting because, this is the first time that I really, well, I didn't play everything on every song, but it's my vision and my, it feels really different, yeah, than handing the reins over to a producer.
Yeah, this is like kind of the most personal album that you've put out so far, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's the most me album,
Yep.
if that makes sense. It's like essence of Lisa.
And is Pebble in a Slingshot a good example of what we can expect from the album Waiting to Fly?
No, I don't think it's a bad example, but I think one of the things that people always say about me is that I don't write, I tend to write in many different styles. Now, they're not so different that they don't all work together, but for example, that song is quite stripped back. The next song has drums and is kind of more of a, so I don't even know stylistically what you call that. The next one, I mean, they have kind of a similar vibe, but as we go through, this one doesn't have horns, but the next song after that has got like trombone and tuba and drums and vocals and guitar. And then the one after that has a whole horn section, and it's kind of a bit like an Etta James kind of vibe. Um, but I would say, uh, yeah. So I would say it's all like, it doesn't sound like it's a bunch of different people, but I think most of my albums do have a variety of sounds on them.
Okay. Album is due for release on October 21st, but until then you're touring around the country with the single. How have those experiences been so far?
Yeah, so I went to Adelaide. I just did 3 shows in South Australia and they were good. I think, COVID is definitely kicking butts right now. So, but the last time I was supposed to go to South Australia, they were cancelled because of the January COVID.
Mhm.
So I think, I'm trying to just temper my expectations uh, a little bit because everything is so uncertain. But it was great to get out and play, and um, the audiences were lovely, and yeah, so good. It's a good experience, and now I'm doing some more shows this weekend, so it's kind of going to be amping up gradually to September. I'm pretty much out every weekend. October,
Okay. And do
yeah.
you find, like, now that it is a bit uncertain with audiences and crowds, do you find that the people that do come to the shows are a lot more appreciative and focused on intently listening to the music?
I definitely think people get more out of my music when they're listening. It is the kind of music that will take people on a journey because I tell stories and that's what people tell me. So it's like that is where the value is, in the performance for the audience. It's in coming and being immersed.
Okay. And you mentioned sort of the tour is ramping up. Is that going to become more expansive once the record is out as well?
Yeah, where are you? What part of the world?
Just south of Sydney in the South Coast.
South of Sydney. Yeah. So in September I have quite a few Victoria shows, and Sydney in the Blue Mountains. I can't remember if that's September or October. Uh, and then north again and south again in November. So, and then I'll be doing Tasmania toward the end of the year and going back up north to Queensland.
Okay. Nice and busy.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I'd like to get to Western Australia. I've never been to Western Australia, but I don't know when that will occur. Possibly not until after next year. So yeah, and then I'll start writing soon, and then I'll be recording again as I go along. So that's
Alrighty.
kind of my plan.
Brilliant. So finally, where is the best place for people to support you and track your creative journey moving forward?
Oh, well, I have a Patreon page, so people can find me on Patreon, Lisa Richards World. I have an email list, and they can sign up for that on my website. So I usually send out emails every month, and yeah, on the Patreon, I send out new songs and baby songs and unfinished songs, so people can kind of stay up to date. Yeah, and then of course Facebook, Instagram, Lisa Richards World on Facebook and Instagram.
Right.
And
Awesome.
Lisa Richards Music is my website.
Okay, perfect. I'll make sure all those links are in the article. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, and good luck with the tours and the record releases and back into the studio.
Yes. Thank you very much for what you're doing. It's a great vision talking about
Wonderful.
creativity.
Awesome. Thank you so much.